Welcome to Cupcake Digital Painting Part 4. This tutorial will be going over how to do the finishing touches on your cupcake painting. We're going to create the wrapper, add a background gradient, and add finishing details to your painting today. By the end of this tutorial, your entire digital painting should be completed and look something like this. To start, we're going to begin the wrapper on a new layer. To create your wrapper layer, click the plus sign and add a color layer above your shadow layer. This layer should be in between your shadow and the frosting layer. Remember, you can move it by dragging it where you need to. So here I am starting my new layer. I am placing it in between my frosting layer and the shadow layer. I'm going to put all of my layers back to 50% opacity while I am coloring and working on this project. We're going to use the split screen feature once again to view your cupcake reference photo while you're working on your Medibang paint workspace. You'll want to see what color your cupcake is through the wrapper. Since the cupcake I'm working on is a chocolate one, the colors that are visible to me are going to be more in the brown families. If you had a vanilla cupcake, you will need to select a color that's more closely related to your cupcake reference photo in the parts of the wrapper that you see the cake through the wrapper. So I'm setting up my split screen here, finding my reference photo, dragging my split screen over so it doesn't take up too much space. Remember, you can pinch and zoom into this photo to get more detailed. I'm making sure my new layer for my wrapper is at 50% opacity, and I'm making sure I'm still using the acrylic paintbrush, and my brush settings should still be at 30% opacity in the brush tool. I'm going to select the appropriate brush size for the space that I'm working in, and I have selected a darker brown color that I'm going to use to shade inside of the interior parts of the wrapper that have the darker shadows. So depending on the kind of cupcake color you have, you will be applying a color over these shadowy spaces based on your reference picture. So I tried to find something in a brown family. I'm only adding this color to the shapes of shadows that I see in the inside creases of the wrapper. I'm allowing that brown color to cover the black completely, so it's a little more solid. It's okay if it's a little patchy to start with. We'll be doing some finishing details on that later on in this video. So just work your way across and around the entire wrapper, looking for those shadow spaces that you can add your brown or your color that you've selected. Notice I'm just skipping some spaces there at the end where it gets really dark. I'm not adding more color, and I'm also going to add color to the top of the cupcake as well, where I see cake underneath the frosting. So this is where I'm adding some color to any visible part of the cupcake on the top part of it. Try not to forget these areas. I'm looking at those spaces in between the cupcake wrapper creases, and this is that small space in between the wrapper and the frosting. At this point, you can go back to the wrapper and select a lighter version of the color you chose for your cake and shadow parts. You're going to use this color for the bottom part of the wrapper that has the outer creases. So you'll notice I'm selecting a lighter brown color, and I am going to apply this with a thin paintbrush, a small paintbrush, just to the bottom part of the outer crease edges. So I'm not going all the way up the crease. I'm not moving into the white part of the cupcake. I'm just working on the lower half, on that outer edge of the cupcake wrapper, streaking in some lines there. You will need to add white to the white parts of the wrapper. You're going to be layering more white where the wrapper looks really bright white, and you're going to layer less white and press more softly over more gray looking areas of the wrapper. Your brush will still stay at 30% opacity. From here, I am selecting a thinner brush. I have my white selected. I'm starting to add a lot more white to the really bright spaces of the wrapper. I'm pressing a little harder, layering a little bit more color, kind of working my way around edges and creases so that way these parts of the wrapper stand out to me. Where the wrapper looks a little bit more gray, I'm going to use a slightly bigger brush size, softer brush, letting that gray still show through the wrapper. For really bright white highlights and details, it's a good idea to change your brush opacity to be 80 to 100% so the white brush strokes show up better. You're going to use this wherever you need to see more highlights. So I'm bringing my opacity up to 80% and I am using this to make these little tiny highlight details on top of the cake with some stippling marks, so little circles, little scribbles, tiny dashes and dots. This is going to make the top of the cake look more realistic because I'm representing that shiny texture on the cake surface. So anywhere that you can add something like this in is a nice finishing detail to do. I'm bringing my opacity back down to 20% to continue to work in the wrapper part because I do want to add some white highlights to the wrapper and I don't want to cover too much of the gray, but I do want my white to show up nicely. So to continue to work on your wrapper as you need it. Don't forget to add back in any little white highlights, dots, or dashes to the creases of your wrapper, the outermost creases. This will really make your wrapper look more three-dimensional. So pay attention to those little details as you work your way down the creases of the wrapper. So don't forget to continually save your work, and at this point we're going to look for reflected color in the wrapper. This is going to give your wrapper a great lighting effect. Your background color and the candy around your wrapper might be reflecting color or bouncing color back onto the white parts of the wrapper. For my drawing, I'm using a purple. I'll also be keeping my brush opacity low at 20 to 30%. So from here I'm picking a lightish purple color, something that looks like it matches my background a little bit but isn't too bright and intense, and I'm bringing my brush size up a little bit and the opacity is at 21%. I'm adding this purple on top of the areas on the cupcake wrapper that appear to take on a little bit more gray. So I'm not completely covering all of the white space I just worked on. I'm just simply accenting some of the gray shadows that I see with my reflected color choice. I'm also looking to add this purple where I might see it on the interior part of the creases, so it would overlap some of the brown that I see on my wrapper. And I'm going to work my way around, zoom in and out, and check for places where this can be added to. Now's a good time to test out what your wrapper layer looks like. Hide your reference photo layer with the eye icon. Bring your wrapper layer to 75% opacity, that's where this will stay. Your frosting layer is also at 75%. Your candy and shadow layer should be at 100% opacity. So look something like this. Hide the reference photo, bring shadow layer to 100, bring your wrapper layer to around 75, bring your frosting to around 75%, and then bring your candy layer to 100%. And this is what your digital painting looks like so far. At this point, we're going to be adding a background gradient. So you're going to be selecting a color for your background. It can be the same color you see in your reference photo. Adding a new layer with the plus icon. You're going to move this layer so it's underneath your shadow layer. Keep your reference photo layer hidden during this process. Selecting your gradient tool on the top menu bar, it is to the right of the paint bucket tool and it looks like a rectangle that is shaded in from dark to light. You want to select two colors for your gradient. Remember, the color picker works by selecting a color from the outer ring of color and then selecting its value from the square within that circle. You're going to pick a dark and light version of your background color. The light color needs to be visible as your top box in your color picker, and your gradient tool should also have the linear option highlighted. So taking a look at the next image, you will see what our color picker looks like. Your color and gradient tool icons should look something like this. Your lighter color is highlighted in the front facing box of the color picker, your dark color is behind it, and your gradient tool says linear and 4 back. So here I am selecting and making my new layer go underneath my shadow layer. This is for my gradient background color. I have selected two gradient colors, one light, one dark. My light purple is on the top box. I am now going to drag a line from the left to the right of my screen across my workspace, and this will apply my gradient. The longer your line stretches, the smoother the gradient will be. Once you have your gradient the way you want it, now's the time to check your painting for any gaps where color still needs to be placed and add finishing details. Finishing details look like making sure all your sprinkles are fully colored in and have highlights, that your wrapper is fully colored in and you don't see any background color gaps coming through. And you just want to gradually go through and find any candy or shadows that need to still be filled in. So what you'll see me do here is I'm zooming in and I'm looking for places in the painting that can be neater and places in my painting that still need to have gaps or spaces filled in better. And I'm accenting edges and highlights as needed to just make things feel more complete. I'm also going to add a little white around the base of the cupcake where the crease kind of meets the bottom edge. And I'm going to add a little bit of darker shadow brown into the inside space of the cupcake wrapper. I'm also going to neaten up and make more solid any candies that are on the top of my cupcake layer. I'm working directly in that layer. You'll notice that is highlighted right now. So anything that you need to add, you do need to select the layer that you want to work in, since these are all still separate layers. Add your stronger white highlights as needed throughout your painting. White highlights will really make your objects pop and feel three-dimensional. When your painting is done, you need to save it and export it as a JPEG to your device. You created your digital painting. Congratulations!